all alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Though we're all like nonsense, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. Smoking gun, you got me on the run. We know that will come. We're out up till dawn. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Oh, we're all like nonsense, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. All alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Though we're all like nonsense, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. monsters, everything that brought me alive. Though we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a rebel's fight without an alibi. Took my innocence without an alibi. Smoking gun, you got me on the run. We know there will come. We're out up till dawn, but how can I hide it without an alibi?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ladies of VR show, where we watch the Ladies of VR game every week here on Mondays and talk about stuff or cast. This one's going to be a talk about stuff because I am Psychaotic, and with me in the booth, we have got the one and only Sweet Potato. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, of course. So if you haven't heard, there's hope on the horizon for the Echo community. Another Axiom last week opened up the server for their upcoming title. It is codenamed A2, and is planning on put out a roadmap basically for their development and where the future of the game is going to go, and then also opened up a suggestion station, which I think was pretty cool, and basically is open for anybody to put in suggestions. And Sweet Potato and I were talking a little bit specifically about what would we like to see, from reporting and protecting women, because if you've ever watched this show before, you know that that's a hot button issue here for us. We like to talk about that a lot, and talk about how we can improve it and bring awareness to it. So I thought it was a no-brainer to have Sweet Potato on to kind of talk about this issue.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, Sweet Potato, for those who, maybe are not as familiar with you, because I know you do a lot from the shadows, can you, just a little bit, how long have you been playing video games? How long have you been playing Echo? Just like a really brief TLDR.
Yeah, and this is very fresh in my mind because if you didn't know, on the A2 server, if you're interested in, early access to the game, you have to fill out a form. And those are the two questions, like the first two questions on the form. So, I mean, I've been gaming in various forms for over, let's say, 25 years since I was a kid. And that is going to age myself. I am a 33-year-old lady. And then I've been playing Echo and VR for 7 years, I guess. That sounds so long, since 2017. So yeah, that's a bit about my gamer cred history. And then I also just kind of wanted to throw in there why I am here tonight to talk about this specific topic. As a female player, this is definitely something I've experienced in various forms since playing multiplayer games, since engaging with communities on online platforms, going back to IRC, Discord, whatever else there was, Xfire, Team Chat, stuff like that. So I've seen it, I've experienced it, and while, as a 33-year-old lady, I can't say that I'm a target demographic. I feel like I have, experience enough, and within my own sort of personal profession, am passionate enough about this topic to want to see gaming communities do better. So that's a bit about why I'm here.
Hell yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. That's awesome. So, you've been around the block, so to speak. You've seen a lot, played various different games, and also just various parts of different communities, IRL as well. So like this is, something near and
Yes.
dear to your heart. And I cannot imagine a better person to have on here to talk about this stuff, because we've talked about it as well. Before we've had you on the show, we've just talked about how gaming culture kind of, contributes to a lot of systemic sexism, and how that's so deeply ingrained. And, the thing that we always come out of that conversation with is we want to do better. And I feel like with, another Axiom now coming forward with the new A2 game, and building it ground up, it raises the question, like, well, now we have the opportunity to be part of the community that is going to, try to influence another Axiom to build this game right. What is it that we are looking for? What are the biggest hot button issues that we really want to address, and how do we, combat that? And so to kind of, kick it off, the biggest thing I think that I have heard over and over and over again in the Echo community is how much of a pain reporting is. And I get it. It's a pain in the ass, because you basically, after somebody has already been toxic, then you have to start recording if you don't, have metal up, or you're not PCVR. And at that point, it becomes a hassle to record that after the fact, and then get the video off of your headset, and then go email Rad to try to get something to happen there. And it's gotten to a point where, I don't know if it's true for you as well, I've stopped bothering to report people.
Oh yeah. It's definitely like you have to pick and choose your battles with reporting. It really has to be something particularly egregious, or like a pattern behavior for someone, for me to go out of my way to take all of those steps and report them. In the early days, it was kind of the same thing. I probably reported people twice, and then a third time when I sort of, later on, I'd say in the past year or two. And two of those three occasions where I reported someone, I got back a response saying that it wasn't egregious enough for them to do anything about it. So, yeah.
No, I agree. Like that's another part of the reason I stopped reporting as well, is, I reported something and they're like, well, it's not really something we can act on, or like the video that I got wasn't the most egregious of the behavior, so it went nowhere. And it's frustrating. And you know what? That's not even unique to Rad. I want to, put that asterisk on here that we do when we have conversations like that. This is not us, pooping on Echo specifically or Rad because they've mishandled this issue. That's not the case. This is kind of a systemic issue across gaming. And on that note, I want to pull out a statistic, because I actually, when I was first planning this topic, it was supposed to happen a while ago. I went through and I like dug through a bunch of statistics on like in-game reporting, and how that stuff kind of works, toxicity, who's experienced it, who's experienced what forms of it, yada yada. And then one of the most horrifying statistics that I found was 24% of gamers say that they utilize in-game reporting. Like, that's so low. Like, to get to the point where, basically 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 people think it's something worthwhile to do is terrible. And it's not unique to Echo. I experienced it with Rocket League as well. I've given up reporting there. It's just gotten to be so commonplace that reporting isn't nearly as powerful of a tool as it should be, or can be for that matter. And so, with that in mind, how do we improve the system, going into A2?
I'll just add on to that.
Yeah, please.
I noticed somewhere in that report, I had it highlighted, I can't find it, but what shocked me as well is, if I remember correctly and read it correctly, men are more likely to report than women, which is so fascinating to me. And I wonder if that's because the frequency in which women, or other people of color, other communities as well, experience harassment and other forms of toxicity is so common that it's just like, you kind of get numb to it, versus I wonder if the reason why there's that odd discrepancy where men are more likely to report is because they may experience it less, and so it feels more extreme when it happens. How do we combat it? I think part of it is, the culture, right? The community culture, which is so hard. It's so hard to get right. Right now, because what was it, 3 in 4 people experience harassment or experience others being harassed. It's commonplace, and so you get numb to it. part of it really is the culture. It is the in-game or the, the developers stated stance on that type of behavior and the consequences associated with it. I think that's, maybe a good starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. Five spot in chat saying, let's be honest though, that's the same as IRL for people standing by when that shit is happening. I mean, that's fair, right? Like valid, but at the same time, it is significantly less effort and less dangerous to get involved in like reporting something going on online than it is to like actually physically get involved in something going on in front of you IRL. So the fact that that is that low is shocking to me. Like, it's not like you see an argument going on in front of you or you see somebody getting harassed in front of you. It's like, you go, okay, do I really want to get involved in this? Like, does it become an actual physical safety concern if I get involved in this? Or if I see something, do I actually go down and report it to the police? No, it should be as simple as clicking a few buttons. But the fact that it's gotten to the point where it feels so hopeless that so few people are utilizing it, I think really speaks volumes as to how broken A, the system is, and B, the culture is, as you were talking about. It's gotten just so commonplace that like people just kind of quit instead. And that's another number that I pulled out when I was reading through this, because it's 24% feel that there's reporting and 23% just straight up leave. And I don't mean like leave the match as in they've said toxicity is something that has like fully caused them to stop playing games. Both individual matches and just the game overall, and I believe it. Like there's been so many times where Echo and other games, I and friends that I have really had these conversations with themselves, like, do I really want to keep subjecting myself to this if this is considered normal?
Yeah, definitely. If that sort of behavior is commonplace in games, then it makes you question whether you belong, because you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't seem right. Why are we allowed to, like, why are people allowing this to happen? And you're like, well, I don't think this is right. So clearly I don't belong in this community. And at this point, 2023, where we're at in like, the world, that's just not acceptable anymore in the gaming community. It's not acceptable to say, oh, well, girls or women are such a minority in the gaming community, or any group is a minority in the gaming community anymore. That's just not true. And we're actively fighting against it if we just sort of become complacent. And then I also just want to say, with Five's comment there about people standing by in real life, I've been in situations where I have stepped in, and to varying degrees of success. Everything from being chewed out from the person that was clearly being harassed to like a girl group forming at 2 a.m. while we were all walking home trying to defend against some random guy. So it's weird, and it's in real life there's that added factor of, like you said, like sort of like physical safety, but in the gaming space, like there's no reason for it to continue at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not like nitpicking, but it's something that kind of leads into another point that I had here. You mentioned that like we're no, women are kind of no longer the minority in games. While doing research for this topic, I went through and I literally found by genre the breakdown of male to female players of video games. And I'll preface this with the study where the study was 2017, so before COVID, before people found new things to do indoors. It's likely shifted a bit, but the thing that really stuck out to me is the lowest percentage of women by genre is actually in sports games, which like. It makes sense, and I'm curious as to how that translates to VR, because the study was done with pancake games, and obviously Echo being more physical probably relates more to like actual sports than it does sports sports video games. But like at the same time, we're still very much still fighting that stigma, still fighting that minority factor. And it's getting better. Don't get me wrong. It is definitely getting better over time. We've seen communities like the Ladies of VR pop up that tends to, grow in size and then also retain a lot of members. Like so many times I've heard people say, if it weren't for, XYZ groups, I would not still be playing, these games. So it's getting there, but we're still the minority, and we need to do better at being able to grow that if we want any hope of evening that out. Because I assure you, girls play video games. They do.
Yeah, you just don't hear them because they don't want to hear you.
Exactly. It's how do we fix that?
And I was thinking about this earlier today around like what are all the barriers, and really it's like, you know, especially with sports games and gaming, it's like as a girl, you know, you are a kid, and you know it's not as extreme as it was say when I was growing up, but there are still parents and families that kind of, whether intentionally or unintentionally, discourage you from doing boy things and encourage you to do girl things, games, sports, generally boys things. So not only are you growing up and you're like actively fighting against those sort of cultural norms, but then you get into those spaces, you get into sports, you get into gaming, and your credibility is questioned, your knowledge is questioned. And so, you know, even just seeing, and this is no fault of another Axiom or anyone in that Discord, but you know, it's pretty obvious, it's pretty notable that the majority of the people contributing to that those conversations, those suggestions, are men, even though we know, like with the ladies of VR community, we know there are women out there. We know there are like amazingly good players that are thoughtful and think about the game and think about the strategy, but we're not seeing those voices. And it's because, you know, I'd say less. I say we, but honestly, like it's not me. I'm not the person. You're the person's like a Glass, like all of those amazing players, Rosie. Like you're the ones that, you know, you're so smart and you're so knowledgeable about this game. But I'm not seeing those voices in the conversations, and I think it's just because we're so highly questioned when it comes to our credibility and our knowledge that we just don't even want to try.
100%. Like it's I'm trying to find words for it, because it's like honestly one of the most frustrating things in the world. And if you talk to me or Glass or Rosie or, you know, anybody else that has fought their way up to that, you know, higher standing in competitive and in the community, it's one thing that we have all kind of talked about before is, you know, for every thought that you have, everything that you say, every play you draw up, just anything you contribute is going to have like a higher level of scrutiny in it, or like a higher level of, you know, questioning of like, okay, are you actually here because you know what you're talking about, or are you here because you're a girl? And it's infuriating to get to that point. And Tucker 85NL in chat saying, what kind of men are you playing with that makes you ladies have this discussion? It's, you know what, it's not even people that I'm going out of my way to play with. It is just the general, you know, culture of public matches, not just in Echo, but like beyond in every game, really.
If I may be so bold, Tucker. I'm speaking to Tucker.
Oh.
Honestly, it's men like you who aren't aware that this is an issue for, you know, pretty much all female players. And it's not a criticism on you, but the reality is that, you know, there's still people who are surprised that this is happening, even though we're like screaming from the rooftops that it's a common experience. So, you know, if anything, I hope, you know, Tucker and other people in the chat who may be surprised that we're having this conversation, that you know, learn from it and start to realize that we need your support to kind of move this forward.
Yeah, okay, before we get back to it, Party Crew, that was disgusting. Got the double ender there to walk herself into bubble to put that in the goal. Good Lord, that was pretty. But yeah, it's the harsh reality of the situation. And I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I was so blown away by that play.
And that's why we need a space for people like you who are just passionate about the game and want to watch the game and want to play the game without all the bullshit.
For real, it's rough. It's rough to deal with, and it's like I've been fortunate to, like, the longer I've been in the game, I've been able to find some circles of support, which has been awesome. But like the fact that it took me that long to find those circles, or had to make those circles myself,
you know, really did.
It makes me sad. Like, how many girls started this game and like dealt with what those lower level lobbies are like and decided, nah, this is not worth it. And like, you know, those are players that could have been more psychos and Glasses and Sweet Potatoes and Rosies, but weren't because of the state of things. And I don't necessarily blame them. It's not easy. And it's something that I hope, you know, going into A2, which is the whole point we were having this conversation, it's something that's addressed at the ground level, you know, to create a more welcoming environment, because we can do better, and I hope we do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, it should be inherent in I use the term policies because that's, sort of my professional lingo, but, inherent
Yeah.
in like any sort of community guidelines, game, the term, like whatever it is that when you join the game for the first time, you're reading through. I know Echo had like that tutorial, but it was so tedious and long that people probably didn't pay attention or skip through it. So maybe that's a solid, tangible piece of advice. If you're going to include that sort of guidelines part of the conversation in your tutorial, make it interesting at least.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot. More numbers to throw at you guys, because I don't know if it's just me and just the way that my brain works, but like I've always found that numbers just have more gravity when I think about things. So yeah. We talks about like, if we can make it better at the ground level, then like maybe we get more players that make their way up. 49% of women have quit playing games after running into toxicity. That's it's insane. It's insane to me, and it makes me so sad. And for those of us, those of you following along in chat, I'm not just pulling these numbers out of nowhere. These are numbers compiled from Unity, like, the game thing, Unity. They did a survey on this. There was a first post survey, and the Anti-Defamation League did a survey on this. And these are all numbers compiled from those surveys and studies.
Yeah. And that 49% of women quit after experiencing toxicity. That's of the women who have even started playing, because there are absolutely people out there who, hear about this and don't even get into it, don't even get into multiplayer games. When I started Echo Arena, I was on mute for like the first 3 weeks because I was so scared to talk and interact with people.
And cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want another number?
Yes, let's hear it.
Men are far more likely to actually utilize voice services in games, and like Echo is one of the games that is most voice oriented because of how social it is, but that number is actually 76% of men across all multiplayer games compared to just 53% of women. So more numbers for you. I'm sorry, I love numbers. Continue.
That's like, it's shocking's not the right word, because I see it, I know it, I've done it, right? It's crazy to see that, because it's an integral part about like these team-based games is voice communication. And so that's just another barrier, that if a woman wants to get into it but they don't want to be hassled, they have to kind of limit themselves in their ability, because they can't communicate the way that other people just naturally do. They don't even think about it, they don't even think that as a barrier. Bullshit.
Yeah, it's and voices, just when you're playing these video games, right? It's not like people see your body. They don't see what you look like. They don't see anything about you. The only piece of like really identifying, information or characteristic that they have is your voice. Yeah. And so, a lot of times with these toxic players, like that is what their trigger finger reaction and judgment is going to be based on is your voice. And I mean, we see it with not just women, but like, people, younger people with higher voices. How many times have you heard people screaming about squeakers? Like, it's the voice is, the first, line of attack really for a lot of toxic interactions in these games. And that's why, I appreciate that Rad attempted to do something. They put out the voice changers, but, one of the first times I used a voice changer, somebody said to me, it will stick with me for the rest of my life. I've talked about it on here before. Why are you using a voice changer? What are you, a woman? And like, the fact that like, this person was dead serious. Like, there was not like this ironic joke. I was like, do you not understand what you just said?
And it's kind of even from the beginning of Echo, like there were trans players that were being hassled because their pronouns didn't match what you would expect their voice to be. So voice changers, while potentially a useful tool, I don't think that's the solution per se to like the harassment issue. And then we've been talking about voice, and I'm sure you probably want to get to this, but like as soon as someone finds out you're a girl and the harassment begins, as we all know with VR, it doesn't just stop at verbal abuse, verbal harassment. It translates to your virtual body. It's
such a problem, and I have such complicated feelings on like how to deal with reporting, because like there's all sorts of ideal world stuff that I just would love to, like, yes, magically this is going to work, but like in reality it doesn't. Like a couple of times, um people have brought up vote to kick, functionality going into 8.2, which, in theory sounds awesome, right? Like you don't have to really lift a finger to do any kind of reporting. You just hit the button and you hope that the other people in your lobby have the same decency too. The problem with vote to kick, I don't know if you saw this clip that went viral last year.
Oh,
the
maybe
female
not.
streamer that was playing, I want to say it was Counter-Strike. I can't remember. It was definitely some sort of shooter game. But like the second she opened her mouth, somebody else in the lobby said, is that a woman I hear? And like the whole lobby like voted to kick her. It was the middle of the stream. It wasn't like some sort of weird planned thing, as far as I could tell with the limited research I did. But like that is something that I'm sure isn't exactly rare. And when your vote to kick can be abused like that, it has me kind of concerned. Like, sure, there's kind of big asterisks you can put on there and quantifiers, like, okay, if somebody's just spamming the kick button, then maybe they lose their right to do whatever. But it's unfortunately an inherently abusable system. And then you go, okay, well then, what if it's out of the hands of people? Like, what if there's some sort of auto detection, especially with how exciting AI has gotten? Like, could you find a way to auto detect that kind of stuff and address it? And then you start getting into privacy concerns, and I'm sure the last thing Meta wants is more privacy concerns.
Well, it's interesting because it's we're considering both technical solutions and social, like human solutions, right? So this is more of a technical solution, and I hadn't even thought of that sort of unintended consequence of vote to kick until Haskell brought it up in the chat on the A2 Discord today. And like that's so scary because again it comes back to like we're already reminded, right, by people that we don't belong in games. Go back to the you hear go back to kitchen still even in Echo Arena. And then to have an actual mechanism to like confirm to kick you out because you don't belong is so scary. So there is definitely going to need to be a balance if that were to be implemented into this new game of not having it, one, it's already a negative experience to be in a situation where you might get vote to kick just because of X reason, because you're a woman. But then also, I hope that there's some way to not have it negatively impact you in the long term, right? Like if there's some sort of, like if it impacts your ability to join in games, or like, if after a certain amount of kicks you're on a list, right? Like that would be terrible.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's kind of similar to how Gorilla Tag system works. Don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure. What a shot, Fire! Good job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I think it's basically like if enough people hit the report button, you're just gonna get booted, or a temporary suspension kind of thing, which is
it's another barrier, like
it's another
suspension. Like you have to wait for, you have to appeal that, you have to go through a whole process. And do we want to do that?
I think the suspension process can be made better too. Like it should not just be like you can't play for 3 days, right? Like so many times I heard kids in lobbies like, yeah, I got a 3-day ban because somebody reported me for saying so and so's a bitch. Like I can't believe they did that. Like exactly. Like 3 days later, did you really learn anything from a 3-day timeout? Like honestly, maybe you went outside for a little bit, played a different game, but you're back. You didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
And to that, I'm thinking, you can make those suspensions longer, and maybe if you're actually forced to put down the headset for a whole week, maybe that does something. But then also Haskell brought up a really cool idea of like, what if to like finish off your suspension you had to actually go through some sort of like social training or something like that, which I know like a lot of people are going to look at that and laugh and be like, okay, so we're just gonna exactly like we're going to skip it the same way that when Echo implemented that thing where you had to agree to the promise to not be toxic and bring your best self to every game. Like I get it, but those tools also do kind of have a little bit of merit when implemented correctly, and I'm hoping maybe that's something that could be considered.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. Right now, from what I've seen, consequences to that kind of behavior are so negligible. Like you know, you don't even think about it, and it's almost like a badge. Like I hear kids, you know, they're like, oh, I got banned, I want to see if I can, you know, like make it worse, or like, you know, get banned for longer. Like I've actually heard that in lobbies.
Yeah.
So clearly they haven't learned anything. So yeah, any sort of like social contract, or even just terms that, you know, I acknowledge that if I'm a shithead, I'm gonna get banned for, you know, like 3 months, a year, whatever, then they really have no one else to blame but themselves if it happens again.
Pixel Patrick, that's a really cool idea in chat. I'm gonna get to that in a second, but I'm gonna lose my train of thought if I don't finish this first. I feel like that, you know, if a tool like that is implemented, it shouldn't be as focused necessarily on like, you know, don't do this, like this is bad, or, you know, I think there needs to be some explanation, right?
Yeah.
So like, for example, several months ago, I'm gonna leave names out of this story, but somebody got suspended from the game, and it led to this whole like weird movement where like people shouldn't be able to report you for face humping your friend, like if they're okay with it. And I'm like, no. It kind of blows my mind that like, A, that's what you're doing with your friends, like, okay, whatever, you do you, I guess, but don't, you know, you're in a public lobby, like who signed up to watch you face hump your friend in a game? That's not okay. And I feel like if there's some sort of like explanation as to like why that's not okay, it might get somewhere. Because like they were in the VRML server talking about this, and I'm like, well, did the other people in the lobby really consent to watching you do this? And they're like, oh, well, no, I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah, and there's context too, right? Like if I'm joining a lobby and I see the face humping and laughing and whatever, I don't immediately or inherently know that those two people know each other and they're okay with that behavior. And then if I'm like, you know, a kid, or if I'm someone who sees that and is like, oh, they're doing it, so
this is normal. Yeah, exactly. And it's stuff like that. Like even if you're joking, right, and this is some like ironic inside joke you have with your friend, you're still in front of other people who don't have that nuance. Like especially when we've got younger kids playing this game, right? And it's such a weird dystopia that we live in, where kids are being raised by what they see on their headsets. But it's reality.
And that's, I know you want to get to Pixel Patrick's comment,
no rush.
but and that's really, you know, why I feel very strongly about having these open conversations, is less for me, right? Like I've been through it. Like these changes, these safety measures aren't for me. Like I know how to handle like my own emotions and those types of situations. It's for those younger players. It's for the younger girls that are coming into these games and haven't been exposed to that. You shouldn't have to be like, you know, the chill girl who's okay with, you know, racist or like sexist jokes to be able to play video games. You should be able to be like, hey, that's making me uncomfortable, and then people respect that.
Yeah. I've heard a couple of times girls have come to me and they're like, Saika, my friends do this, and this, and like I understand this isn't really okay, but they think it's hilarious and they keep doing this to me, or they keep doing it in general. Like what do I do? And like I hate to sound so cut and dry about it, but like, are these really your friends?
Yeah.
If they think this is okay? Like if they're engaging in behaviors that are hurting you and they think this is normal, and that like you don't have to surround yourself with people like that. Like it makes me sad.
The caveat there though is like, especially when we're talking about competitive play, if you're the one, you know, the one competitive player in a friend group of competitive players, and that's how they behave, you have to distance yourself from that thing that you love, and you know, that competitive scene. You know, like that's the balance you have to take, right? Like either you have to accept that behavior, because there's no way they're gonna, like, in that moment at least, right? You feel like, well, if I say something, they're just not gonna include me. They're not gonna invite me for scrims. They're not gonna, you know, do that. And so you have to compromise, and that's not the answer, but that's the current state, and it sucks.
Yeah, we could do a whole 3-set show on the weird politics structure that this game has taken on. And that's, you know, that's kind of another point that Haskell brought up as well, especially about toxicity, is like the VRML badge kind of becoming this weird, like, I want to say symbol of pride, but like that's not how she put it. I kind of want to pull up her post, but like,
Yeah, I
just,
remember
like
reading
weird
that.
elitism. That's I think the one of the words she uses. Like it brought up this weird elitism sense on a lot of these players. And even another player talked about it, how they got their first badge and they were super excited, and then other players were like, "Oh, you only started this season, like you're not that good."
and then
And
yeah, and then on the flip side, I have a VRML preseason, like preseason 1 badge. Okay,
Yeah.
I am completely out of practice. I'm no good. I'm pub trash. But if I'm embarrassed to have that tag on, because people will have not only have the expectation of me having been in VRML that long, they don't know my history, but also being a woman, right? So if I have that tag, I have this target on me of like, oh, you better be fucking amazing, or we're gonna shit on you.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and it's like, I don't know, the competitive nature of this game is great, and the leagues that it has created and how many people have come together to support it, but it's also created some weird politics where it gets into that, where toxicity near the top has become rather normal for a lot of these people, and it's again just the culture of the game. You either get used to it and you deal with it, or you push through it, or you leave. And I really hope with A2 it's not those aren't the only options. I hope it's handled kind of at the ground level and handled better than it was with Echo, because we can do better and we need to. Yeah. Pixel Patrick saying, I have high hopes for A2. Half of the devs know all the things Echo should have, or know the problems of Echo. And you know what? That's kind of part of why we have these conversations here is, I don't know how many women they have on the team. I don't know how many minorities, people, minority groups that they have represented on the team. But like, I am so dedicated to having these open conversations, not in an attempt to shame and blame, but just to bring awareness to the issue so that, hopefully there are better solutions that come forward. Like you mentioned, we going way back. I'm so sorry, Patrick. You brought up hopefully AI can just detect if somebody is throwing, like self-goaling, or giving the game ball to the other team, and then open a vote kick option instead of everybody able to start a vote kick. That's actually a really interesting idea. I haven't heard that before.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Hey.
So the stream is messed up. My Echo camera went completely black, so we can hear them, but stream, I realize you can't see the game. I can't even see the game. Sorry about that. That's just the way luckily that was into the third round. So sorry, just wanted to say that I'm aware of the issue, but I can't do anything about it. It's Echo just blacked out. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Patrick, that's a really interesting idea here. It's because that kind of doesn't open it to abuse of like somebody just trying to be a shithead and like open the option. It has me still concerned of like how accurate is that AI, but I'm also fairly confident at this point it would probably still be better.
Yeah, and like, so a couple thoughts. What information is feeding that AI? Like, I know that I don't have any like numbers or references to pull, but I've read articles around like, AI has been used for, face detection, but what faces have they been pulling? Typically it was, white men, right? So when we're talking about implementing AI, it's also coming back to making sure that it is sort of an inclusive, diverse process. And then also to your point, what you said about, we don't know who's on the team that would be advocating for these things internally. Again, I know, at least I think I know, there are some women who've been brought onto that team that were, from Echo back in the day, that are solid people. But their website, if you look at their, like, who's on the team, all men. Right. So when we say, oh, they know what the issues are from Echo, so they'll definitely be thinking about it. Are those the type of issues that they're really thinking about or that they're prioritizing? Probably not. And that's fair. They're a game development company. But, the question for me is, are there people internally that are advocating as strongly as people in the community? I think that is also another, important factor for change, for growth, for innovation in, protecting or creating a better space for their players in terms of harassment and things like that.
Yeah. Tucker, it makes me sad to read that. It does. If you meet someone like that, you as a woman should also bite off and not play the victim role. I'm not gonna fully, give my story here. I'm in my mid-20s. I work in a space that is mostly men. I went to school for engineering. I was one of 6 girls in my program. I went to school for robotics. I can assure you that the few moments that I chose to not put up with a lot of the behaviors that we've been describing here, both in video games and in my real life, if you bite off, so to speak, and if you kind of fight back against it, then a lot of times you're seen as the irrational one. You're seen as the one, blowing up at nothing. You're on your period. Like, insert whatever kind of garbage you want here, and it's. Yeah, it's hearing the phrase "not play the victim" makes me really sad, because a lot of times, like, I'm not saying you sit there and you take it and you whine about it without doing anything about it, but a lot of times it's really not fair to blame the person being harassed for not doing anything, or being upset by the behavior, I think is more accurate there. It's a systemic problem that, like, goes beyond video games there, and that's not something we really have time to get into tonight, but I would love to at some point. But yeah, so actually, you know what, there's one more thing from this report that I want to pull out here, because it really stuck out to me as someone who went to school in a technical area. One of the key findings from the ADL survey was one of the most long-term effects reported by women from toxicity they experience in video games was a decreased motivation to play video games and pursue technical careers, because they are traditionally male-dominated spaces. And that made me really sad to read, because I had never kind of made that connection in my head, but like I get it. When you experience stuff like this in video games, and it kind of turns you off to the whole idea of like a male dominated space like that. And it's sad. And I hope I'm not coming across as just kind of like whining, because I'm not saying all men are bad. I'm not. There are, some of the closest allies I have in this struggle are men around me who have recognized this, and it's been fantastic. But I also recognize the hesitancy for like people to want to subject themselves to that long term.
Yeah, and it makes me think of, I know we've talked about this already, but the whole situation with like Blizzard Activision, when you have a community that is toxic, and specifically like that male toxicity, and then those players become employees, that's the environment that they're setting internally as well. And I just make it very clear, this has nothing to do with another axiom. This is just totally separate based off what you were saying. I'm not making any comparisons at all. But like just the unintended consequence of like being a female who is in that, who's in that industry. It's just another barrier, right? It's like you have to trust that the companies you're joining care about that kind of stuff and aren't going to continue that toxicity, both within the games that they develop and the like the company, the culture of the company.
Yeah. So I have a lot of faith in another axiom, and thank you, Savannah. It is so good to see you in the chat here, and thank you for the bits as well. We love you so much, homegirl. I have a lot of faith in another axiom, especially with a lot of people that they brought on, and they brought on new and familiar faces, who have experiences in this kind of thing, and then also we're going to bring fresh takes on how to address it. I just, I will not shut up about it. I finish every single one of these conversations we have on the show like that. I will not shut up about it. I will not stop talking about it. I don't care if I sound annoying. I will not stop until somebody, well, not somebody, but like just in general, it gets addressed, and it's not some sort of weird taboo subject we have to avoid. And it's not something that just kind of gets suppressed. And like, it's, we don't talk about it. You either deal with it or you leave. So.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that. 'Cause you've actually I'm so impressed by your stamina and your courage to do it like publicly, on Twitch and within the Discord. So, kudos.
I appreciate that. It's like you mentioned earlier, it's never for us. It's for the other people that don't feel comfortable having that voice. And for that reason, I will keep doing it. But that is, unless you have anything else you want to address, I think that is the end of our show for tonight.
No, I'll get on my end.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sweet Potato, for coming in and having this talk here. This was one of my favorite ones.
anytime.
I thought this was great. So I appreciate it. You have anything you want to plug before we get on out of here?
Absolutely nothing. I'm so sorry. Join the A2 Discord. Be part of the
Yes.
suggestion station. Get involved early. You know, we're like early stages of this game, and it's so exciting to see some sort of continuation of, you know, that 0G sport that we've all become so passionate about. So,
yeah. 100%. Join that Discord. Be part of A2 from the ground up. It is going to be awesome. For as far as I can tell, it's going to be awesome. We got stations. What more could we ask for?
Yeah.
Anyway, we do this every Monday evening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes it's a cast, sometimes it's a conversation. Either way, it is always a good time. So if you joined this here tonight, you should join us next week. Until then, I have been Psychaotic. This has been Sweet Potato in the booth with me, Girligan, operating the cams, running the show, doing everything that he does to make sure that we have this platform, and we appreciate him for it. Until next week, good night. As Palador would say, be happy, be safe, be healthy. Bye.
Bye.
All alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Going around like nonsense, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. Oh, smoking gun. You got me on the run. We know that will come. We're all up till dawn. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. Took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Going around like nonsense, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. Oh,